6 years ago, I was in therapy after a breakup that needed to happen because the relationship was very toxic. But usually, I would go to therapy with my therapist, Nicola, sat across from me, and usually I would just talk incessantly about my ex, about the relationship, and I'd get in these kind of thought loops. And I thought this one particular session on this particular day was going to be just like that. But it turns out my therapist had other plans. I don't know whether she planned this, actually, but the point is, I didn't know this at the time, but she was going to say something that would not only derail the session and take it in a whole new direction, but would also take my life in a whole new direction. And I'm not just saying that, it really did. So as I'm sat there talking about my ex, there's a natural dip in the conversation, there's a pause. She stops, she disengages from me for a moment, and then she asks me something that's so random and kind of disorientating and strange that it stunned me. She says, "Oliver, what do you think about that bowl on my desk?" And I'm sat there and I'm like, what? I thought I'd misheard her. And she says, "Oliver, I'm being serious. What do you think about that bowl? I want to know what your thoughts and opinions are on that bowl." So now that I realise that she's being serious, I take a moment, I look at the bowl. It's this blue bowl full of like incense and potpourri and stuff like that. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, stunned. I literally don't have an opinion to share. It was as if something got in the way, grabbed my neck, my throat, and stopped me from saying anything. I was like, oh my God, why can't I say anything? I was frozen, stiff, staring at this bowl. The silence turned awkward. You could cut the tension with a knife. And I was like, I sort of dissociated. I started getting anxious. I started getting panicky. And as I sat there, I'm realising, I'm having like an insight, like an epiphany. And I realise, oh my God, I do have an opinion on that bowl, deep down. But I'm terrified to share it. I wanted, more than anything in that moment, for her to give her opinion of the bowl, because that would then give me something to chameleon myself around. Do you understand? I could then be like, oh yeah, I agree with that, etc. I could morph my opinion around hers and keep the peace. And as I'm sat there, and I'm like, I think I do this in every single area of my life. I chameleon, I morph myself around everyone else's opinions, around everyone else's thoughts. I don't really know who I am. I don't really trust myself. I don't really trust my own thoughts or opinions or anything. My whole sense of identity, who I really am, is a construction to make you all like me, to avoid conflict, to avoid upsetting anybody, to get approval and validation from other people. And I think my therapist knew that about me. So instead of let me continue to say the same old circular stuff that was ultimately getting me nowhere, she asked me that question to get me to reflect. That the whole breakup and the relationship turmoils that I was going through was a symptom of something much deeper. And that was that I was living as a people pleaser. And I had been doing it for so long that I had lost my voice. I'd lost my voice entirely. I lost my sense of self. But one thing though, I'm happy to report, is that in the years that followed, I found my voice again. In fact, one of the most rewarding aspects of my personal growth journey, honestly, has been finding who I really am. I want to break down some of the things that I've not read anywhere else, some of the things that have genuinely helped me reconnect with my own voice again after an entire lifetime of people pleasing up to that point. The first thing, let's talk about the first thing that really helped. When I first sat down to write, I found it really difficult. I sat down to write and I had this kind of student mindset where I'd heard about journaling, I'd heard about writing, about how important it is or whatever. But the first time I sat down to do this about my breakup at the time, I couldn't do it, I couldn't put it together. And I think that's because I was taught, this kind of student mindset where you have to write for an essay or you have to do something at school. You never actually taught how to write for yourself. But I stuck with it and it became one of, in fact, I will in this moment say it's probably the most important habit that I have ever built. And that is a daily writing habit. 300 words, 500 words, it doesn't matter. When you sit there and you write, you, 1% at a time, reconnect with yourself, with the voice that exists outside of other people's opinions and approval. It's just you and it's just the page. And when you engage in that practice, you meet yourself. The second thing that will help you find your voice again after a life of people pleasing. Do you ever laugh at things that you don't find funny? Do you ever smile at things when you're not particularly happy? You just have this like default kind of anxious smile. Do you ever agree with things that other people say that you don't actually agree with? Well, as part of my recovery journey, I recognised that I was doing this more or less all the time. It was actually quite scary. I was like, where am I in all this? I'm basically being this chameleon, Mr. Nice Guy, pretty much permanently. Now, when I realised this, it was a kind of an ego-crushing realisation. It made me feel terrible about myself, honestly. I felt like a fake, a fraud, a phony, an imposter. But that was necessary, because that recognition of when I'm being a chameleon or when I'm wearing a mask, I couldn't have grown and couldn't have learned who I really was without that recognition. So what we really need to do is we need to notice these moments of self-abandonment. When are we turning away? When are we being inauthentic? When are we being a chameleon? Why are we doing that? Whose approval are we really seeking? And most importantly, how would we show up if we were not a chameleon? If we were truly being authentic in that moment, how would that be different to what we just did? So the third thing, what I'm about to share with you, the habit that I'm about to share with you is important, essential, a game changer, but unless you follow a few of the steps I'm going to share with you, it will make you look a little bit insane. So what I would like you to do, possibly even today, I would like you to get your phone. I would like you to press record, go for a walk, put your phone to your ear and speak. I would like you to keep speaking. I don't care what you're talking about, but I want you just to not stop talking for 10 straight minutes. Keep going. Now, when I did this, at first it felt awkward. It felt very strange just talking to myself with my phone out there in public. But after a while, I realised that I was actually, probably for the first time really, hearing me without a filter. Now, eventually this led to the YouTube channel that you're now watching. But the biggest win, a bigger win, more than any of that, is that I finally stopped editing myself in my own head. And by consistently just showing up and talking, you start realising what you really think, what you really feel, what's really bothering you. You can't find your own authentic voice if you don't use it. And number 4, I used to say things not to be truthful, but to be liked by everybody. That means I would agree with things I don't agree with. That made me very dishonest. And in some ways, it made me manipulative because I wasn't telling the truth from an authentic place. I was telling a warped version of the truth designed to get you to like me. Very different. So what I did was I started noticing the stuff from before when I was being a chameleon and not telling the truth, and I started telling the truth. It might sound very simple. Simple, not easy. Try it for a week. It may change your life, honestly. I started expressing true opinions. No, I don't want to see that movie. I started telling the truth about where I wanted to eat. If someone had a political opinion, I wouldn't necessarily go into a big tirade about it, but I would say, I don't see it that way. See, when you start small and you start saying what you really mean and communicating what you really think, the feedback loop that's going here is that you're learning what you really think. By sharing what you really think, you learn who you really are. The truth is, mate, you ain't got to become someone new. You haven't got to be something you're not. Who you really are, you might feel like you don't know yourself, but who you really are is in there somewhere. It's just been buried under an entire lifetime of this persona of trying to please everybody at the expense of yourself. And finding your authentic voice again is one of the things I help men do in my private coaching. So feel free to check out the link in the description below and you will find all the information about that. Take care, mate. See you in the next video. Stay courageous.